This is absurd, as we have had some very new information drop surrounding Pete Alonso and the Jays' pursuit that nobody has talked about that could change the entire landscape of how the Jays pursue the first baseman. We're going to break that down, as well as discuss some new reports that have dropped surrounding Roki Sasaki that have Jays fans absolutely fired up. So stay tuned for all that in this episode, because these reports make Jays fans a little bit livid. Before we get into it, folks, quick reminder, if you're part of the 71% who aren't subscribed to the channel, this is the place to be for daily Jays content. Ladies and gentlemen, we're getting close to 16,000 subscribers. If you want to help us towards that goal, make sure to smash that subscribe button. And thank you guys again for your continued support as we produce daily Jays videos. Ladies and gentlemen, spring training is inching closer and closer. Catchers and pitchers reporting is inching closer and closer. But Pete Alonso is still yet to sign with the Toronto Blue Jays or sign with any team in general, along with Alex Bregman. And a new article dropped yesterday, and it's a bit of a different one. And this report is super intriguing, and I want to dive into it here now. So you can obviously see Pete Alonso's tax options favor the Jays over the Mets. Now, we've talked a lot about, of course, speculation regarding how the Jays, stack up against the Mets, whether he's interested in the Mets. We know at this point that he prefers to be a New York Met, but there's been a lot of talk just in general surrounding the Blue Jays free agency and the tax threshold and all these different tax things. But in this case, a new article dropped that the tax options actually favor the Jays over the Mets. And I want to take a step back and actually dive into this, because this could have, this is a bit more of a deeper analysis into what this means going forward for the Jays before we get into the Roki Sasaki stuff. So free agent first baseman is reportedly near a decision on where he'll play next season, with the Mets and the Jays considered the front runners. The choice between New York and Toronto provides the Jays with an unusual tax advantage. Alonso would save on taxes by choosing to sign in Canada rather than remaining in New York. The Mets and the Yankees, along with other pro teams in New York, are usually among the most taxing options for a free agent. And it goes into some of the specifics regarding the taxes in New York being 10.9%, California being 13%, and all these different things, right? Which I'm not going to dive into the actual, taxes too much, but I want to dive into the fact that, again, do I think that Pete Alonso is going to choose the Toronto Blue Jays because of tax savings? I mean, it's possible. I think he does want to be a Met, but when you look at some of the advantages that the Jays can have, I mean, the narrative all the time is that, players are going to lose taxes by coming to Canada and being in Toronto. In this case, it's actually different. It's the opposite. They would save, Pete Alonso would make more money, technically, I guess, save money on taxes by coming to Toronto. And it could actually be not necessarily a deciding factor, but if it comes down to the point where Alonso needs a little bit of a push to come to Toronto, I'm of the mindset now after the report came out yesterday that he doesn't really want to be in Toronto. You could just let him walk and find another option if he really doesn't want to play for the Jays. But if he does want a bit of a push, you got Max Scherzer, one of his close friends, or at least one of his friends that we're being told, as a Toronto Blue Jay. So we have one of his close friends, the Jay, and then now the taxes favor Pete Alonso with the Jays. If Alonso opts to play for the Jays, he'd be subject to Canada's federal provincial income rate, all these different things. So you can see this. The second paragraph's a bit interesting. It provides a pretty, interesting overview. To illustrate the tax impacts on his choice, imagine that the Mets and the Jays offer him the same contract, 3 years, 70, which includes a $20 million signing bonus. For the purposes of this illustration, we assume that Alonso is from Florida and reportedly lives there, is a Florida resident. That is important since Florida does not have a state income tax and all these different things. If he signed for the Mets 70, he'll owe $25.9 million in taxes. And then if he signs at the Jays, he's going to owe a little bit less. So it's super intriguing now. And again, I'm not going to go into the specifics or anything like that, but it's super interesting. You see this at the bottom. In short, if Alonso signs with the Mets, he paid $28 million. If he signs with the Jays, he paid $25. So about a $3 million difference. And I don't think $3 million is going to sway Pete Alonso one way or the other. But I wanted to bring this up because the narrative about taxes is not always we've seen John Heyman, we've seen a bunch of, reporters say, hey, they're not going to come to Canada because of the taxes. There are times like this where it would actually benefit Pete Alonso to come to Toronto to regarding taxes and, saving money there. And does this have huge implications for the Jays, when it comes to actually signing Pete Alonso? I think he's not going to choose one way or the other over a few $1 million. But what I do think is that this is a good sign going forward for future free agents as well here. And that's one of the bigger things. There's also been some rumblings going on, take it with a grain of salt, but Boras won't let Alonso or Bregman sign until both contracts have been agreed to. With the Blue Jays, the high offer on both, he'd lose leverage if the club signed. Jays won't announce Guerrero extension until Alonso is signed. So these are some other things that are happening. Now, people are starting to speculate now why it's taking so long for the Toronto Blue Jays, or really any of the teams, for Pete Alonso to sign with any of the teams. And it seems, again, both Bregman and Alonso, the two biggest remaining free agents, are Scott Boras clients. So you pivot that, you pair that with the fact that they're both available. it seems like Boras won't let either one of them sign until, contracts have been agreed to, and the Jays have a high offer on both. So let's say Alex Bregman, I mean, it's reportedly Alex Bregman have the 6-year deal from the Jays. So, Bregman has a 6-year deal with the Jays, and he also has the Alonso offer. The Jays reportedly do at 3 years, $75 million, whatever it ends up being. We know Alonso doesn't want to go to Toronto right now. He prefers the Mets, but the Mets are holding back their offer. Bregman is kind of similar. He's holding out for a bigger offer from some other teams. He wants to touch $200 million, and I think if the Jays want to do $200 million, they'd probably get him. But it's also interesting now because, some speculation that the Jays won't announce the Guerrero extension until Alonso is signed is super interesting as well, because maybe behind the scenes, the Alonso signing, Jays have already extended to a degree, or at least have advanced talks with Vladdy, and now they're waiting for some other moves to be done. Again, take it with a grain of salt. I think at this point, they're actively negotiating for Vladimir Guerrero Jr. I think that's their number one priority as we're getting closer and closer to that deadline. And I think maybe there's a world they don't announce it, like a lot of people are speculating, until one of their signings is made, whether that be Bregman or Alonso. Now, whether that's with the Jays or not, I think they don't announce the Vladdy, signing necessarily until they make their other moves. And that's what kind of the rumor is right now. So I wanted to include that with you. And there's been some, rumblings. The first thing that Pete Alonso needs to do when he signs with the Mets is fire Scott Boras. Some fans saying, why do the Mets fans think he's mad at Boras? Boras isn't the guy who rejected a 7-year, $158 million contract offer. If anyone is to blame for the situation, it's Alonso. Boras isn't the reason he can't get any long-term offers. It's an interesting point. He probably should have accepted in hindsight the 7 years, $158. He ultimately didn't. Let me know down below what your thoughts are on this. Very interesting. A bit of a different pivot. Like, obviously, we know the Jays are super involved in Pete Alonso, but kind of diving into some of the other reasons, it makes things very interesting. Now, something else that's interesting, folks. A new report drops surrounding Roki Sasaki. I know we're all over the Roki Sasaki situation, but look away if you if you remember this situation. There were stories about a deal years ago between Sasaki and the Japanese sports marketing powerhouse Dentsu, and that Dentsu, not Sasaki, was the driving force behind his move to the Dodgers. During what we can emphatically call a job search, Sasaki visited Toronto, where the Blue Jays showed him around, while he appeared to wish he was elsewhere. I got a feeling that Dentsu was driving the ship. A Blue Jays official told, a media outlet Friday in Toronto, Sasaki looked like he didn't even want to be there. And let's not forget, there were reports that the Jays were heavy favorites at one point. The Jays traded Miles Straw, whereas this report is coming out saying that the Jays actually, were never even in the running, and that Sasaki didn't even want to be in Toronto because he basically had his mind made up because of the Japanese sports marketing powerhouse Dentsu, who are linked with the Dodgers, which is what they basically told. It seems like he had his mind made up to go to the Dodgers before, because that would provide the most marketing for him and his agency Dentsu. That's what it seems to be. But then the other part come back, which, is fair enough. It makes some sense. Whether you want to argue it's tampering and all these things, it's up to you. It doesn't really matter. What matters here is that he wished he hadn't even been there, wished he was elsewhere when touring the Toronto Blue Jays facilities, whereas we were hearing that he was super impressed by the facilities, that he loved everything. And it's just a punch to the gut. Now, the Jays have pivoted fantastically. They got Santander. They got Jeff Hoffman. They got Max Scherzer. They made the trade for Andres Jimenez. Their pivots, obviously Jimenez was before the Sasaki and the Soto signing, but their pivots this offseason have been good, right? They've had a solid offseason. They need to go out and they need to get at least one more bat, maybe a lefty reliever as well for sure. But, we're all over the Sasaki stuff now, but the fact that this came out is a little bit, not only disheartening, but just a little bit crazy to me that this was even... It's going to be tough, and you can see what it says here. It might take Ross Atkins and Blue Jays 10-plus years to trust another free agent from the NBB after being tricked into trading for Miles Straw's contract for nothing. Yep, that's the case, and it hurts, but it is what it is. We move on. The team is in a pretty solid spot right now. They need to make a couple of other moves. Pete Alonso would be nice, but again, Sasaki just played the Mets. Sasaki played the Jays and the other teams, Mets as well. The Jays got played again. Let me know down below what your thoughts are. A ton of information coming out. We're going to keep you up to date with all the latest Blue Jays news. So make sure to hit that subscribe button. We're on the road to 16K. Thank you guys for watching. Cheers.